Chapter 2, Node 88. Elias did not go to intake. He meant to. He left Bay 9 with Bex's words still live in his head and the phantom of that impossible reflection walking just ahead of him like an afterimage that refused to fade. He took the service corridor toward the intake wing, boots striking the sealed floor in the same tired rhythm as the rest of the shift spill, and told himself he would see the copied flag, confirm that whatever had happened at the partition had an architecture to it, and then make a decision from there. Instead, at the junction where the corridor split between intake processing and central relay, every wall display in the sublevel trembled at once. The change was slight enough that most people only frowned. A ripple passed beneath the glass surfaces, as if something had moved through the pixels from behind. The wellness slogans held for a second, their letters pristine and mild in Veridia's preferred palette of pearl and blue.
Rest is a common good.
Then every screen in sight blanked to a depthless gray. Workers stopped. Somewhere farther down the hall, a tool tray clattered. The gray held for 3 beats. Elias counted them without meaning to. On the 4th, the nearest display filled with a system schematic he knew intimately. Sub-level routing architecture for red channel nightmare compression, all thermal corridors and node clusters and insulated feeder lines disappearing into the city's buried dark. One section blinked with emergency emphasis.
Node 88.
Not bay designation, not relay rack. A buried indexing point deep in the oldest architecture, far below any section still shown on current floor maps. The system voice that followed was not the warm, sexless concierge cadence used for labor guidance and emotional correction. It came through harsh, flattened, almost unfiltered.
Manual intervention required.
A pause.
Manual intervention required.
The same phrase appeared on the screen, but the letters would not settle. They juddered, split, merged, as if 2 typographic systems were trying to occupy the same sentence. Beside him, a worker muttered,
"What the hell is Node 88?
Nobody answered. The screen flickered again. For an instant, the schematic inverted. White became black. The clean lines of the Somnia architecture thickened into something more primitive and more severe, like a skeleton revealed beneath cosmetic tissue. Elias caught the glimpse and felt cold gather under his skin. He knew, with the irrational certainty of nightmares, that if he let the moment pass, he would lose it forever. His wrist slate chimed with a direct system tag.
Vein E technician response authorized.
No supervisor stamp, no chain marker, just authority delivered out of nowhere, like a hand already reaching for him. Another chime followed immediately, this one private and local.
That's impossible. Do not answer that call.
He stared at the message, then at the schematic, then at the blank corridor ahead, where the route to intake waited on one side and the route to central relay opened on the other. He turned toward central. By the time he reached the relay spine, the public traffic had thinned. Automatic partition doors opened for him without requiring badge confirmation. That alarmed him more than if they had stayed shut. Somnia's lower levels were designed to resist improvisation. Clearance here was layered, logged, and usually delayed by at least one bureaucratic breath. Tonight, the facility seemed to be making room. The relay spine ran beneath Sector 4 like a polished artery, narrower than the main maintenance corridors and far cleaner. White composite panels sealed the walls. Conduits ran behind frosted glass in disciplined vertical lines. The light was the color of diluted milk. In ordinary circumstances, Elias would never have been allowed this far down without a systems escort. The place smelled different from the rest of the sublevels, less metallic, more clinical, as though the air itself had been filtered a second time to remove the honest traces of labor. His footsteps sounded too loud. At intervals, inset into the walls, small transparent wells held arrangements of preserved moss and miniature white stones, tiny contemplative gardens meant to soften the architecture. Somnia liked to place such gestures near thresholds where the machinery of control grew most obvious. The message was always the same. This is not coercion. This is care, artfully delivered. At the end of the spine, a circular hatch stood open. Beyond it, the corridor changed. The polished white vanished. Older materials took over. Ceramic tile yellowed at the grout lines. Exposed structural ribs, maintenance labels from defunct design languages half covered by newer Somnia panels. It felt less like walking deeper into the same facility than crossing from one era of belief into another. Here, Veridia's brightness thinned. The lights hummed instead of glowing. The air warmed noticeably, carrying a stale mineral dampness that no quantity of eucalyptus could disguise. He checked his slate. The route line pulsed ahead, descending toward a zone marked only by deprecation symbols and legacy warnings. No 88 sat at the bottom like a secret. The city had failed to bury. He knew the old stories, of course. Every lower-tier tech did. Before Somnia consolidated the dream infrastructure, before Veridia perfected the language of mutual wellness and civic serenity, the early network had been rougher, hungrier, built by engineers who treated the human mind less as an ecology to steward than a field to mine. The earliest nodes had not merely sorted dream matter. They had probed coherence, tested bleed thresholds, pursued speculative architectures that would later be described in official internal histories as ethically immature. Most of that substrate had supposedly been decommissioned or folded into safer systems after the consolidation reforms. Supposedly. At the next door, his badge failed, then accepted on the second attempt with a tone he had never heard before, thin and reluctant. The chamber beyond was vast. Node 88 occupied the center of a forgotten operations hall, the size of a civic auditorium. Elias stopped on the threshold and simply looked. The room had once been important. He could feel it in the proportions, in the rise of the ceiling, in the amphitheater slope of the outer platforms arranged around a central well, but the importance had curdled into abandonment. Dust lay along the upper railings in gray seams. Many of the observation consoles were dark, their glass broken or clouded from within. Thick cable bundles, older and less elegant than the current infrastructure, snaked down the walls and disappeared beneath grated floors. Some had been cut and capped, others still pulsed with dull arterial light. At the center stood the node itself. It was not a server rack or modular bay. It was a vertical ring assembly, 3 stories high, built around an empty cylindrical shaft. Suspended within that shaft, held by articulated stabilizer arms and collars of blackened metal, hung a sphere perhaps 2 meters across, made of interlocked mirror surfaces that shifted at the seams like eyelids. Its skin caught the room in fractured pieces and returned them wrong, elongating distances, bending lines, delaying motion by a fraction that made Elias feel unsteady just looking at it. A low frequency filled the chamber, not quite sound, more like pressure translated into vibration. It settled in his sternum. A single legacy console stood active at the edge of the central platform. Its display glowed with red channel diagnostic storms and warning text layered so thick it had become nearly unreadable. The newest overlay floated above the rest in clean modern type.
Anomalous live coherence detected. Source: Node 88. Observer binding. Pending.
Observer binding. He had never seen the phrase in active use. It belonged to the older architecture, to an era before Somnia learned to hide its appetites behind compassionate design. His slate vibrated again. Bex calling. He almost answered. Then the sphere in the shaft rotated 1 degree, though none of the stabilizer arms moved, and every light in the room dimmed in submission. The call died unanswered in his hand. Elias crossed the platform carefully, as if approaching an animal whose stillness might prove deceptive. The mirrored sphere reflected him in sliced fragments. One shard showed him approaching in real time. Another lagged half a step behind. Another had him already standing at the console, head bent, hands braced. He looked away from the reflections and focused on the display. The data made no immediate sense. Coherence metrics were spiking well beyond dream simulation thresholds. Spatial recursion warnings cascaded past faster than he could parse. Beneath them ran a visual checksum stream tagged as live, but sourced from no recognized Somnia camera schema. Not captured content, then. Not a stored nightmare, nor even a corrupted feed. Something active, something transmitting. He touched the console. At once the chamber responded. A clear pane of light unfolded above the controls, then widened into a full volumetric projection. Static burst across it in dense granular sheets. For a moment, he saw nothing but visual noise, silver and black, the signal attempting to become itself. Then the image locked. It was a city, not Veridia under distortion, not a nightmare's symbolic approximation, but a city with the weight of actual weather and use. Elias understood that before he understood anything else. The image possessed the authority of detail. Smoke moved according to wind. Steam lifted from vents in white plumes. Light struck surfaces unevenly, caught on wet metal, died in soot. Nothing in it had the loose instability of dream construction. It existed with the ugly confidence of matter. He was looking down over an immense industrial expanse built in black concrete, iron lattice, and regimented lines of floodlit roadways. Towers rose not in curves or reflective skins, but in blunt vertical masses linked by elevated transit tracks and smoke bridges. Vast banners hung from their facades, each marked with a sigil that made his chest tighten. An eye reduced to geometry, split by a descending bar like an act of permanent correction. The sky above the city was a low vault of iron-colored cloud, lit from beneath by furnaces and atmospheric burn. No garden softened it. No wellness light translated the hour into psychological comfort. Every structure seemed built to announce endurance through domination. The city was not trying to calm its inhabitants. It was trying to harden them. Audio came a second later. Not screaming, not nightmare babble. Order. March cadence rolled through the chamber in layered impacts, boots on concrete in long synchronized columns. Public address towers broadcast directives in a language Elias recognized as his own only after a moment, because the tone altered the meaning. The same words Somnia would use for cooperation, balance, contribution had here been stripped of all caress and restored to command.
Alignment is peace.
The voice was male, resonant, amplified over some enormous civic square.
Deviation is waste.
A procession moved through the projection. Thousands of workers or soldiers or some hybrid civic class, all in dark uniforms cut for labor and control. Their movements were disciplined without being robotic. Their faces, where visible, were not blank with sedation. They were intent, tired perhaps, hardened certainly, but aware. That made the image worse. This was not chaos. It was a coherent society organized around punishment, scarcity, and ideological obedience, and it had outlived softness long enough to become proud of its own brutality. Elias found himself leaning closer, despite every instinct that told him to back away. The projection shifted, as if responding to an unseen cue. The point of view rose through the city with impossible smoothness, passing over rail lines, smokestacks, processional roads, and terraces crowded with ordered ranks of bodies. It ascended toward the facade of a colossal administrative structure built into the side of what might once have been a mountain and was now armored in concrete. At its summit spread a ceremonial balcony wide enough to receive armies. Someone stood there. He was still partly obscured by distance and atmospheric grit, but Elias knew the outline before the face resolved. The body held itself with a stillness too complete to be natural. Not frozen, not stiff, controlled. Every line of posture seemed selected and fixed by intention, as though indiscipline at the level of muscle had long ago become impossible. The camera climbed higher. The figure stepped forward into floodlight. Elias felt the room drop away. It was his face, not resemblance in the loose family way, not a dream's symbolic borrowing. His face, altered by age or attrition or a life lived under other pressures. The mouth was firmer, the cheekbones sharper, the eyes set deeper under a brow carved by endurance into something colder than fatigue. He looked older than Elias by perhaps 10 years, though the difference might have been composed less of time than of accumulation. Every hesitation Elias had ever known in himself seemed absent from that face, stripped away with surgical cruelty. What remained was not merely confidence, it was conviction hardened into rule. The uniform completed the horror. Black, high-collared, severe in cut but immaculate, carrying no ornament except subtle architecture at the shoulders and throat that suggested office without needing to declare it. He wore authority the way other men wore weather. The alternate Elias placed one hand on the balcony rail. The city below fell silent. The transition from March thunder to total stillness was so immediate. Elias nearly gasped. Tens of thousands of bodies held in exact obedience beneath a toxic sky, waiting. The figure surveyed them not with theatrical grandeur, but with the practical attention of a sovereign counting the terms of his own endurance. Then he spoke.
Production exceeded target by 2.3%.
The amplified voice filled the chamber around Elias. It was his voice, the same grain at the low end, the same cadence foundations, but honed to a colder register, flattened of uncertainty.
Losses remain unacceptable. Sentiment leakage in the southern districts will be corrected. Intake discipline is to increase immediately. No citizen will presume exemption from contribution.
A beat.
Rest is not indulgence. Rest is strategic maintenance. To dream usefully is to serve. To withhold is treason against the whole.
The language was close enough to Somnia doctrine to make Elias's skin go cold, not identical. The alternate city had not disguised itself as compassionate. It had made the same foundational bargain and simply spoken it aloud. The realization hit like ice water, as if the thought itself had triggered a response. The figure on the balcony stopped speaking. His head turned, not toward the crowd, not toward some advisor beyond frame, toward Elias. The camera should not have allowed that. Whatever this was, however live the transmission, the point of view existed over there, inside that city. Yet the man's gaze found the exact angle of observation and held it, held him. The sensation was not metaphorical. Elias felt it in his body, as tangible as the pressure field vibrating through Node 88. He was no longer watching a feed. He was inside a mutual line of sight. The alternate Elias stepped closer to the edge of the balcony. The image sharpened impossibly, floodlight catching the planes of his face. There, at the left brow, a pale nick where Elias had a scar from childhood. There, the slight asymmetry at the mouth. There, unmistakably, himself completed along a path he had never taken. When he spoke again, the amplified public voice was gone. The next words arrived at ordinary human volume, clear as if delivered across a table.
You found the old gate.
Elias's throat closed. The chamber's diagnostics erupted. Warning text spilled across the projection margins, overlays screaming threshold violations, observer lock escalation, cross-domain reciprocity. Somewhere in the older machinery, a klaxon tried to start and failed, producing only a choked electronic pulse. He should have cut the feed. He knew the procedure for unstable coherence events, knew at least the opening motions, if not the antique specifics of this architecture. Instead, he stood transfixed, one hand braced against the console, pulse hammering against the field in his chest. On the screen, the other Elias regarded him with a calm that made panic seem childish.
You are thinner than I expected.
The words were absurdly intimate, not shouted accusation, not supernatural pronouncement. Appraisal. Elias found his voice by force.
What are you?
The mouth on the balcony moved in what was not quite a smile.
A better answer to the same design.
Behind him, in the real chamber, every light flared and dipped. The mirrored sphere inside Node 88 began to rotate in earnest, seam lines flickering. Reflections multiplied around the room. Elias glimpsed himself on every surface, dozens of fragmented versions all leaning toward the impossible image. His slate began vibrating violently against his wrist. Bex again, then system pings layered over her call, then a facility-wide alert pulse. He ignored all of it. The alternate Elias glanced aside as if receiving information from someone off frame. When his eyes returned, there was the faintest trace of impatience in them, and beneath that, something far stranger, almost recognition.
You have already seen the resemblance above you.
The sovereign reflection. Elias's stomach turned.
What does that mean?
It means your city inherited our language and forgot its honesty.
In the projection, movement stirred beyond the balcony. Figures emerged from shadow, officers perhaps, severe silhouettes holding back at a respectful distance. None of them came near enough to share the floodlight. The one at the rail remained the fixed center of the image.
You process sleep.
You externalize burden. You tell yourselves this is mercy because your architects learned to perfume coercion.
Every sentence struck too close. Elias hated that his silence must look like assent.
You're not real.
The answer came at once.
Then why are your systems routing me as live?
Elias's gaze flicked involuntarily to the console. The feed was indeed tagged live, not simulated, not recursive artifact. Live coherence had risen again, pushing into values the current system did not know how to display without corrupting its own interface. Observer binding had advanced from pending to active. A new warning appeared beneath it.
Bidirectional surface stability, 31%.
He stared. Something metallic clicked inside the node shaft. The alternate Elias followed his gaze, as if reading the same metric through entirely different machinery.
You should step back.
Elias did not.
Why?
Because the gate is crude, and your side has neglected its upkeep.
The sentence barely finished before the chamber convulsed. Sound vanished first, sucked inward as if the air had imploded. Then came force. Elias staggered against the console as a pressure wave burst outward from node 88, not explosive but spatial, a wrenching distortion that bent light and seemed to drag the room a half-second sideways. The projection ballooned off its plane. The city image no longer hovered neatly above the console, but spilled into the chamber in depth and atmosphere. Smoke rolled from its edges. A hard wind carrying grit struck Elias across the face. He reeled back. The central shaft was no longer visually empty. Beyond the rotating mirrors he saw, impossibly, extension, as though the cylinder inside the node continued somewhere else into a vertical space lined with black metal and industrial lamps. The two architectures had not merged exactly. They had overlapped enough for depth to become negotiable. Facility alarms finally found their voice. Not the gentle melodic tones of a Veridian emergency, but an older klaxon buried under the system's later civility, hoarse and urgent. Red bars ignited around the operations hall. The preserved calm of the place shattered in ugly pulses of color. His slate auto opened an incoming channel. Bex's voice broke through in fragments under static.
Elias, answer me. Whatever room you're in, get out now. Central just flagged an unregistered legacy bind, and they've started seeding deletion authority. Do you hear me? Get out.
He thumbed the channel open without taking his eyes off the node.
Bex.
Her relief came through as anger.
Oh, good. You're alive. That's almost inconvenient. Where are you?
He looked at the console readout, at the impossible city pressing closer through the projection, at the mirrored sphere turning like a pupil trying to focus.
Node 88.
Silence. Then, very quietly.
That shouldn't exist.
It does.
Another pressure surge rolled through the hall. This time, the outer consoles lit one after another in cascading failure, throwing up corrupted fragments of the same live feed. Across the upper ring platforms, the brutalist city appeared in broken windows of red-black motion. March columns, floodlights, a factory district under ash, a line of exhausted workers kneeling beside rail tracks while masked overseers moved among them with diagnostic rods. Not symbolic cruelty, Elias thought with sudden nausea. Administrative cruelty. Systemic, efficient. The kind that no longer required rage because it had become procedure. Bex heard something in the background and swore.
I'm on the lower stair. Do not do anything heroic or stupid before I get there.
No.
Yes.
Don't.
When have I ever listened to you at the exact moment you needed it?
The line cut as local interference spiked. In the node shaft, the overlap widened another degree. Elias could now see a balcony or platform on the far side of the opening, black metal slick with condensation or ashfall. Figures moved there, armed, disciplined silhouettes. One stepped forward into partial light, face hidden behind a hard respirator mask with narrow optical slits. Not a dream guard, not a nightmare abstraction. A soldier prepared for hostile atmosphere. The alternate Elias raised a hand slightly. The soldier stopped. Their eyes met across the thinning barrier.
Your administrators will attempt erasure.
They have done this before, I think, though not successfully enough.
Elias's mouth felt numb.
What do you want?
The answer was immediate, and because of that more frightening than any threat.
Continuity.
The soldier behind him shifted again, and Elias saw the weapon in his hands, heavy and industrial, built for recoil and real matter. Not sleek Somnia pacification hardware. Ballistic, crude by Veridian standards and therefore somehow more final.
All systems seek continuity.
Yours has hidden its violence in sedation and managed forgetting. Ours passed through collapse and learned discipline. Now both are under pressure.
The gaze that held Elias was terrible precisely because it was not wild. It evaluated, calculated.
You are the nearest stable correspondence.
That is why the gate favors you.
A bitter laugh escaped Elias before he could stop it.
Stable.
For the first time, the other man's expression changed in any obvious way. A minute narrowing at one eye. Not mockery. Study.
You have endured soft mutilation for years.
You remain functional. Do not mistake that for weakness.
The phrase hit with surgical accuracy. Elias felt, absurdly, the old catalog of accommodations and diminishments flare through him. The swallowed panic, the sedated compliance, the tiny daily amputations he had taught himself not to name. He hated how quickly the recognition answered. He took a step back from the console. At once the live coherence metric plunged, and the pressure in the room shifted. The alternate Elias noticed.
Closer!
It was not a plea. It was closer to a test. Elias stayed where he was. From somewhere beyond the hall doors came the distant slam of access seals unlocking in sequence. Security response. Too late to prevent the event, right on time to contain the witness. The old console flashed a new directive in urgent white.
Deletion matrix armed. Awaiting execution authority.
That phrase he knew. Not from use, but from training materials stripped down for lower-tier techs. Hard purge of unstable dream matter. Total severance. In theory clean. In practice violent to every substrate involved. Another line populated beneath it.
Local operator eligible.
Elias stared. The system was inviting him to erase whatever this was before Central overrode him, or perhaps it was baiting him into formal participation. In Somnia's world, those were often the same thing. He lifted his hand over the control field. Across the projection, the other Elias watched without visible alarm.
If you sever this imperfectly, you will not destroy the bridge. You will injure it. Injured structures behave unpredictably.
That sounds like a threat.
It is an instruction.
The soldier at the rear platform stepped fully into light. Elias saw then how wrong the overlap had become. The soldier's boots were not entirely on the far side anymore. The front edge of one sole intersected the threshold of the node shaft in a way that made perspective meaningless. Dust or ash spilled from the tread and landed on the real platform below the console. Not projected. Landed. He felt something in his mind give way. Not break exactly, but lose the last excuse for denial. The ash at his feet was warm. The outer hall doors crashed open. From the lower access stair, Bex ran in first, too fast for caution, toolkit still in one hand, as if sheer habit had armed her with the wrong object. Security personnel spilled in a beat behind her along the upper ring entrances, shouting for containment and local retreat. The sound barely registered. Elias's world had narrowed to the ash on the floor, the soldier at the threshold, and the face on the balcony that was his and not his. Bex reached the central platform and skidded to a stop hard enough that her boots squealed on the grating. For a second, she only stared. He saw the exact moment her skepticism died.
Oh.
Then louder, with dreadful composure.
Elias, move away from that console.
He turned toward her just enough to speak.
It's live.
I can see that.
No, I mean live.
The absurdity of the clarification might have been funny anywhere else. Here it only deepened the terror. Security voices were echoing from the outer platforms now, ordering a perimeter, demanding event codes, requesting central deletion authority. One officer raised a suppression rifle toward the node. Another shouted at him to hold fire. Nobody wanted to be the first to shoot into an architecture they did not understand. Bex's eyes flicked once to the alternate Elias on the projection, and she went visibly still.
Jesus.
The other man regarded her with a brief, cool curiosity, then returned his attention to Elias as if she were peripheral. That, more than anything, seemed to affront her.
Don't like him.
A laugh, raw and unbelieving, almost tore out of Elias. He swallowed it. On the upper ring, a security lead received a transmission and barked.
Deletion authority pending. Local operator maintain line. Do not disengage observer.
Bex heard it too. Her face sharpened into fury.
Maintain line?
Elias understood before she said it. Central did not just want the event contained. They wanted it held stable long enough to study, perhaps to negotiate, perhaps simply to confirm whatever institutional suspicion Node 88 had always represented. And then, when the record was secure and the witnesses manageable, they would erase what they could and redefine the rest. Bex moved to his side. The field around the console made the fine hairs at his wrist lift.
Oh, what's the fastest way to break local binding?
Distance, maybe. Or hard purge.
Maybe.
This architecture predates me by decades.
Very rude of it.
He almost answered. Then the soldier at the threshold stepped again. One boot crossed cleanly onto the node platform. A sound ran through the hall like the intake of an enormous breath. Security opened fire on reflex. White stun rounds and 2 live suppression bolts struck the threshold and vanished into distortion. The soldier did not even flinch. The impacts reappeared 3 seconds later inside the projection city, slamming into black concrete far behind the balcony and detonating in showers of sparks. The crowd below scattered in disciplined waves. The alternate Elias did not turn his head.
Predictable.
The soldier lifted his weapon. Bex grabbed Elias by the front of the uniform and hauled him sideways off the console line an instant before the first shot. The round did not sound like Somnia weaponry. It cracked through the hall with brutal physical certainty, smashing through the edge of the legacy console and exploding a column of old glass and ceramic into the air. Hot fragments lashed Elias's cheek. Alarm screamed in new octaves. The live coherence metric spiked to 91%. The threshold widened. Wind and ash burst fully into the room. Security broke formation. Some returned fire uselessly. Others retreated toward the ring exits, suddenly less committed to protocol than survival. Bex dragged Elias behind a dead observation bank as a second ballistic shot tore overhead and buried itself somewhere in the upper wall with a deep, sickening concussion. From cover near the inner lip of the central platform, Elias risked one look. The soldier now stood half in Veridia and half in the other city, like a figure extruded from one reality into another by force. His respirator lenses glowed faint red through settling dust. Beyond him, on the balcony, the alternate Elias remained motionless, one hand resting on the rail, as if the gunfire were merely an expected inefficiency in a larger process. He and Elias locked eyes again across smoke and warning light. The expression on the other face had changed at last. Not triumph, not even hostility, recognition, complete and chilling, as if he had been waiting not for a city, not for an invasion, but for this specific moment of mutual certainty between 2 versions of the same man. His mouth moved. This time, Elias heard the words, not through the room speakers or the projection audio, but inside the exact architecture of his own inner hearing, intimate as thought.
Now you believe me.
At the far end of the hall, bulkhead seals began descending with catastrophic slowness. Over every functioning speaker, Central Relay announced in its soothing voice that a deletion cascade was preparing for release. Bex turned to him, ash in her hair, face bloodless with adrenaline.
Elias.
For once, there was no irony in her voice at all.
What the hell did you open?